The official story the Trump administration gave us as to why they attacked Venezuela is simple and clean. It's about drugs. A law enforcement action taken to stop narcotics from poisoning American citizens. It was a neat, tidy narrative used to justify military force abroad. But what if this official story was a lie? I'm David Tomsic, and you're watching Clear Signal, formerly the Tomsic Analysis. Welcome. What if the real reason for this mission wasn't about drugs or narco-terrorism? What if it was about seizing a nation's natural resources? In this case, Venezuela's vast oil supply. And what if the explosions that rock Caracas in the dead of night weren't about justice, but about profit? And what if the President of the United States shattered every fundamental law of his own nation and the world to make that happen? This is a story of a secret war, a president who acted like a king, and a global fallout that threatens to unravel a nation. Let's make the case. The White House declared that the drug cartels operating from Venezuela were unlawful combatants, and the United States was now in an armed conflict with them. Indictments for narco-terrorism were prepared. The stage was set. Now, the United States tried to keep the moral high ground, positioning itself as a force for justice against a criminal regime. It was a perfect cover. The narrative of a simple law enforcement operation was repeated over and over again, but behind the scenes, a more ambitious and illegal plan was taking shape. A plan that had less to do with justice and everything to do with the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. On January 3, 2026, the operation began. In the early hours, Caracas was shaken by massive explosions as waves of low-flying aircraft swept through the capital. This wasn't a limited strike. It was a large-scale military operation designed to dismantle Venezuelan air defenses and helicopter-borne troops inserted into the city. Now, as you probably already guessed, there are some problems with this. Let's do this case file study here. Breaking American law. This wasn't just a questionable policy, it was flat out illegal, a blatant violation of the United States Constitution. The power to declare war doesn't belong to the President. Article 1 of the Constitution gives the power exclusively to Congress to stop presidents from unilaterally starting conflicts. Congress passed the War Powers Resolution in 1973. The law is crystal clear. The President cannot commit U.S. forces to sustain hostilities without congressional authorization. Trump never went to Congress. There was no debate, no vote, no authorization. He simply acted, treating the U.S. military as his personal army. Members of Congress were stunned. Senator Tim Kaine called it an unauthorized military attack and a sickening return to the day when the United States asserted the right to dominate the international political affairs of all nations in the Western Hemisphere. Congressman Jim McGovern put it even more bluntly, slamming the move as an unjustified, illegal strike and stating plainly, Congress must affirm its authority and say no to an illegal war in Venezuela, and President Trump must obey the law. Legal experts describe what happened not as law enforcement, but as an act of war. By bypassing every constitutional check on his power, Trump didn't just break a law, he attacked the very foundation of American democracy. The illegality didn't stop at the water's edge. The operation was a flagrant violation of the most basic principles of international law. The United Nations Charter, signed in 1945, to prevent the horrors of another world war, states must not use military force against the territorial integrity or political independence of other states. The operation tore that rule to shreds. There was no UN Security Council resolution authorizing the attack. The claim of self-defense was baseless. There was no imminent threat of an armed attack from Venezuela. The excuse of a law enforcement action was a flimsy pretext for regime change, an excuse that legal experts say holds no water. Legal minds were quick to point out that this is precisely what the court in Nuremberg described as the supreme international crime, the crime of aggression. The global condemnation was swift and severe. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed deep alarm that the rules of international law were not respected. France, Russia, China, Spain, and the European Union all declared the U.S. had broken international law. Brazil's President Lula da Silva called it a grave affront to Venezuelan sovereignty. the world watched as the United States, a nation that so often preaches the rule of law, act with the impunity of a rogue nation. This is a very bad look for America. Trump, once again, has made us look like fools in the world stage. So we've just laid out the case for why we believe Donald Trump's attack on Venezuela is illegal. Next, we're going to expose the global chaos it's unleashing and how it fits into a disturbing pattern of behavior that could bring down our country, one piece at a time. Look, investigations like this take time and effort. If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to our channel. While you're at it, hit the like button and share the video with as many people as you can. Let people know that truth still matters. Let's get on with the video. Next, we're going to look at the fallout. Much of the world, especially in South America, are wondering what Donald Trump's next step is. Will he invade another country as he promised to do? The fallout from this illegal war is already hitting home, and it's ugly. For Latin America, it's a chilling throwback to the dark history of U.S. interventionism. Colombia mobilized its armed forces, fearing a massive influx of refugees. Leaders across the region, even those who oppose Maduro, condemned the attack, seeing it as a dangerous precedent that might makes right. And of course, in American history, we've always had that attitude, that our might makes right. This action has dangerously eroded American credibility. How can the U.S. condemn other nations for violating sovereignty when it does the exact same thing? The hypocrisy gives ammunition to rivals like Russia and China, who immediately decried Washington's blatant use of force against a sovereign state. One expert warned that this sets a precedent that could embolden other nations in their own territorial disputes. And that promise of quick oil money? It's looking more and more like a fantasy. Experts estimate it could take over a decade and more than $100 billion just to rebuild Venezuela's oil infrastructure to its former capacity. And that promise of quick money? It's looking more and more like a fantasy. Experts estimate it could take over a decade and more than $100 billion just to rebuild Venezuela's oil infrastructure to its former capacity. The idea that this would be a quick and profitable venture was just another lie sold to the public. Instead, the U.S. now finds itself responsible for a volatile and unstable nation with no clear exit strategy. How does this look now, America? Once again, Donald Trump has overstepped his authority and got us into even more problems with our global neighbors. Next, we're going to talk about a pattern of abuse. The secret war in Venezuela wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a clear and deliberate pattern of executive overreach and contempt for the rule of law. Throughout 2025, the Trump administration waged a war on established norms. We've talked about that on both of my channels here. It began with executive orders that upended decades of foreign policy, freezing foreign aid, and dismantling the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, which drew widespread bipartisan opposition. Federal judges have ruled that the president had exceeded his constitutional authority, but the damage to U.S. credibility and capacity was already done. The pattern of sidestepping checks and balances and using presidential power to bypass legal and diplomatic structures is the critical context for what happened in Venezuela. It shows a leader who believes he is above the rules that define a democracy. The war for oil wasn't an aberration. It was the inevitable result of that belief put into practice on a global scale. Okay, so let's recap this. A secret military operation, justified by a lie about drugs, was launched to seize a nation's oil. In the process, the President of the United States violated the Constitution, shattered international law, and threw a region into chaos. This wasn't just a foreign policy blunder. It was an assault on the rule of law itself, both at home and abroad, and part of a disturbing pattern of using executive power as a weapon. Trump's legal battles are just beginning. The courts have already pushed back on many of his domestic abuses, but a dangerous precedent has been set abroad. The real question now is not just about the laws that were broken, but whether the system designed to protect us from the abuse of power can still hold. With the world watching, what happens next when a president decides he is above the law? Now let's get you that bonus content. Trump said that popular Maduro opposition leader Maria Cortina Machado doesn't have the respect of the country and suggests she won't be leader. Now remember, Machado just won the 2025 Nobel Prize, the same Nobel Prize that Donald Trump wanted. Now, can he really be that petty and insane? The answer is yes. Former Trump DHS official Miles Taylor argued the U.S. action in Venezuela wasn't about drugs, but likely about seizing oil assets after Venezuela nationalized American property, challenging the narco-terrorism narrative. If you think this is about the war on drugs, he said, you're fooling yourself. How about this? Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's leaving Congress now, she was a Georgia representative to Congress. She said this: why is it okay for America to militarily invade, bomb, and arrest a foreign leader, but Russia is evil for invading Ukraine and China is bad for aggression against Taiwan? It's only okay if we do it. Makes sense, right? United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is deeply alarmed by U.S. military action in Venezuela that sets a dangerous precedent. His spokesman said on Saturday ahead of a likely UN Security Council meeting. So this is just heating up, folks, and we're going to stay on top of it for you. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to love your neighbor as yourself. I'll see you here next time on Clear Signal. Remember, formerly the Tomsic Analysis. Thanks for watching.